Welcome to the Mobile Workforce Podcast, where we sit down and have real conversations with business leaders that have been where you are. During these interviews, we'll dive into what it takes to improve systems and champion processes that maximize performance. Each week, our trailblazing guests share their experiences and understanding of the workforce to help inspire change, challenge our thinking, and share what it takes to successfully travel the road to profitability. Now here's our host, co-founder and chief evangelist of About Time and WorkMax, Mike Merrill.
Hello and welcome back to the Mobile Workforce Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Merrill, and today we are sitting down with our guest, Helen Finucci. Helen was formerly with Microsoft as the customer success sales lead and is currently a consultant for business leaders. Helen's an expert on the sales process and also the best-selling author of the book, Love Your Team, a survival guide for sales managers in a hybrid world, and is an expert on building the right team for your unique business. Today, Helen and I are going to talk about what the right sales team looks like and how to build that special team to help drive your business forward, especially if you are in construction. Helen is also the host of her own podcast called the Love Your Team podcast. So thank you again for joining us today, Helen. Appreciate having you on today.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
Awesome. Well, that was quite the long intro, but it's all your fault because you've done so many things. We just had a bunch to talk about.
Yeah.
So with that, let's just talk here right off the top. What, in your opinion, do you think sets sales teams apart that are effective and built properly for an organization versus ones that are not?
Well, first and foremost for salespeople, and frankly for any teams you manage, is clarity of goals and outcomes. So what is the manager's expectation? And this becomes particularly important if it's a remote workforce, outcome-based expectations. And sometimes the how they get there also comes into play. So for the sellers in an organization like Microsoft, they also are expected to work well across other teams and mobilize resources on behalf of the customer. And in construction, that might be kind of similar, where a general contractor has to bring a team of people together and work well for the customer.
Yeah, that's a great point. So obviously, post-pandemic, we've come through this time period where this became a thing. It was such a thing that you wrote a whole book about it. What was it that drove you to actually put your thoughts down to, pen to paper, so to speak, and share your vision of this?
Yeah, well, I've been managing hybrid teams for over 25 years, always in technology. So I started to realize that a lot of managers were uncomfortable with hybrid teams and were so accustomed to having the teams in the office. And actually in July of 2021, when 4 million people were resigning a month, leaving their jobs, I was doing a keynote at a conference for sales leaders about retaining top talent. And I realized that I had a pretty good approach to retaining top talent, and that was something that folks in the audience wanted more information about. And I realized, I could write a book about this. And so that's what I did.
So you realize, oh my gosh, I'm actually really onto something here.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I have people that have worked for me. In fact, in my book, when people talk about, how great I am and my approach to managing, they're all people that have worked for me in the past, for the past 25 years. So there's a lot of testimonials from folks, and it's it's gratifying. It makes me feel, well, part of what I think is so important that managers do is understand what matters to their teams and help them achieve that, whether it's a promotion, whether it's getting a job done quickly and efficiently and then moving on to the next thing. There's so many things a manager can do to really empower their team and remove obstacles for their team.
Yeah, I think you really hit something interesting there. I think as I'm listening to you talk about this, one other thing I'm recognizing, and I've seen this to be true here in our business, whether you're building a bridge or a building or a custom home or a software product like we do here at WorkMax, it translates. It's the same thing. We're just people trying to accomplish, a list of tasks in a project and complete them in a timely manner and come out with a result that is, equal or greater to the expectation. So in your estimation, what about that process is so translatable between industries or no matter who's listening today?
Yeah, so as you say, we're just people and human beings. And so whether you're, no matter what industry you're in or what discipline within the industry, whether you're in sales or marketing or finance, clarity of outcomes and objectives matter. The team members being able to feel supported by their manager. For example, if one of my team members is struggling with having access to a decision maker and they're really, that's an important decision maker for getting a deal done, we'll brainstorm and maybe we know people who know that decision maker. Or maybe we can get one of our senior executives or leaders to reach out and maybe that person will take a meeting, because often sellers have a hard time getting meetings with senior level people. So that's an example of how I support or remove obstacles for my team. And so I think that translates across industries. And, sometimes that might be that, there's a supply chain problem and we've got to figure out what we need to do to try to shorten the time to delivery of a product or technology. And that will require operations and a team of people really to make that happen. So I think of selling and leadership as it's a team sport, and no one can go it alone. And one of the things I convey to my team from a personal philosophy point of view is that, no surprises. So, tell me in advance if a deal is falling out or if you run into a trouble where you can't deliver an outcome as expected. Please let me know quickly so I can see if I can help resolve that before it becomes, maybe we lose revenue or a deal drops out of the quarter, or frankly, a customer churns because they're not satisfied. They've bought something from us and they're not satisfied with the result. So, tell me early and often, no surprises. And then also I really have a philosophy of transparency and building a relationship and trust. And that's so critical that managers do that no matter what industry.
I love that no surprises attitude. We always say here, and it's just right in line with what you're saying. We always say bad news early is better than bad news late.
That's a great saying. Yes, same idea.
Yeah, you can still take corrective action if you find out early enough and get, out of the ship moving back in the right direction.
Right, for sure.
So that's great. So when you first get into an engagement as a consultant, are there some basic questions that you ask initially or some telltale signs that, one organization or another really has a struggle in a certain area?
Well, I think it's really being curious and understanding what matters to that company or the decision maker. So one of the things I tell my team, whether I'm building a relationship with my team and trying to understand what matters to them so I can support them, it's the exact same thing that I expect sellers to do with customers. And so when I'm in talking to a potential customer, I want to understand what their core challenge is and what success looks like and figure out if it's something, that I can help with. So my area of expertise is sales and building pipeline and technology sales in particular. And I find, particularly in earlier stage companies, startups, that often technical leaders aren't really accustomed to selling. And so there's some fundamentals that they're missing. And in larger organizations, it could be, I say, as simple as managers not being accustomed to setting outcome-based performance expectations because they're used to seeing their team in the office. And if you do a good job in setting outcome-based, expectations, I don't care what my team members are doing on a day-to-day basis, as long as they're delivering the outcome in the time frame expected. So it's kind of common sense questions and things like that, but it's, just really figuring out if it's an organization that we can satisfy or I can satisfy personally, and if we're aligned on outcomes, expectations, timeframes, and things like that.
Yeah, I'm feeling a lot of alignment with your approach to the way that I view things as well, and I am curious too of your thoughts on another phrase that we use commonly, and I say everyone's in sales. We're all in sales. And regardless of your role, if you're picking up the phone, you're in sales, right? Even if you're writing software code, you're in sales. You got to sell your product that you're delivering to the rest of the team and provide value and an explanation of how this is going to make their sales easier or their support easier or whatever it is. So how do you parlay a thought like that into a company that, maybe they don't really have a large sales team, so to speak, but how do you convey that message to them?
Yeah, so it's so important that we're conveying what we do in a way that's meaningful to the customer, because particularly in technology, you can get absorbed in, well, my product is fastest. I could do this the best. Or, we have the latest technology. Well, so what? What is so what about that? So it might be that it enables, the customer, it enables them to shorten their time to market because using your technology is wicked fast or is unique in that it enables a seller to cold call and actually get people on the phone because they have such good technology and contact data. So take a minute and try to translate and think about not what you think about the technology, but what would it do for the customer in their eyes, and speak in their language. And that translation is really tricky for some people. And so literally that's why marketing does messaging and things like that. And sellers don't think marketing knows what they're doing because they don't actually talk to customers. So sellers redo marketing's messaging, but translate it into what's in it for the customer in meaningful business value to that customer.
Yeah, that's beautifully stated. So you're advocating selling the benefits and not the features, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I love that so what phrase because that's another thing. And we try and use that here even when we have a challenge or when we win. It's like, okay, well, we won. Now, so what? So now what? Now what? Like, what's next? Now that we've got that, what are we going to do with that, right? What does that really mean as far as next steps? So love that you're using that in the sales end of things because at the end of the day, that's really what customers are buying, the value and the relationship, not the features, right?
Yeah, so let's talk about winning for a minute because, I expect sellers to forecast when business will close. And some people don't want to be so transparent because they don't want to be on the hook for it. But I don't celebrate diving catch last minute deals coming in because what that does is that robs us from the opportunity of really understanding our potential revenue stream and making sure that we can service that customer, that we have the resources available to help them implement the technology, or if they're buying a physical product like Microsoft, Surface laptops, that we have the inventory and that kind of thing. So it takes some trust and transparency and, different mindsets sometimes, but I think it's super important that managers really create an environment of trust where sellers will be transparent about their forecast, and if something's going to drop out, that they speak about that early.
Yeah, lots of wisdom dropped in there. So when you talk about these approaches and this structure, how does it relate to, again, back to one business versus another? Some companies are set up in a way where, most of the personnel are in sales. I just came from an International Roofing Expo, and it seemed like every other person that stopped by the booth, they were in sales, or, they were basically 1099 commissioned sales reps. So they're kind of running independently. But then there's other companies where, they're salaried employees, they have a commission structure. So those setups are a little bit different. What do you use to dictate what you recommend companies do as far as a structure?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So if you're a small company, don't hire a sales rep right away. What I mean by that, that's not your first sales hire. I think it's way more effective to hire like a outsource calling organization to set up a meeting. So an sales development rep outsourcing, set up a meeting for the owner or the chief product officer, or whoever is the person that needs to work through the value prop, the benefits of the product that they're selling. Because if you hire a seller and you haven't thought through the benefits, the messaging, the value of what you're selling and how you differentiate yourself, that seller is going to thrash. And usually it's the principals, the founders of the organization that have the deepest insight and then can pivot and think through the sales challenge. And working that out before you hire your first seller is super important. The other thing, too, is think about the blend between technology versus, human beings in driving sales. Because sometimes you can do things more efficiently. I know right now there's a tendency for sellers to want, at least in tech, to want to send emails or want to reach out on LinkedIn. But all the textual communication is now suspect because of ChatGPT and AI. So there's no substitute for picking up a phone or using a calling technology to actually reach out and have a conversation. And I also think that the organization with the product has to build the initial sales process and pipeline and success. I think it's really hard to hire a reseller or think that a channel partner is going to take care of your route to market. If you haven't worked through that first, they're not going to do it on your behalf. And so there's a lot of kind of common, I don't know if it's common sense or if it's common practice, but there's a lot of things like that I think are super critical to work out, and you can't outsource sales too early until you're really clear on your differentiated value prop.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, lots of great analogies and advice there. So when you're talking about, let's say, so we had one end of the spectrum, these roofing contractors. Let's say a larger roofing organization that has a sales team of 15 or 20 people, and maybe they're clipping along, they're flowing, business is good, they're busy. What are some things that you think companies could do to hit the next gear, to really level up even more, even if they feel like they're doing really well? What are some tactics that they might take to drive success even higher?
Well, I would ask a couple of different things. So I'd look at a couple of different areas. One is, where do they get their prospecting list? Are they buying those lists? Where's the contact data, and how contactable is their list of people they call or their route to market? And also look at what the sellers are doing. When you add a new seller, is it a linear progression to revenue, or are there things that can be done to optimize the selling fleet that you have? So typically you have really great high performing sellers and then not as great sellers. So if the team is within a company, what I always say is you can't build a high performing team unless you address the underperformers. So there may be some things, simple things that can be done through list, contactability, through using technology to reach companies more rapidly. I think the days of driving around, maybe this is not true in construction, but the days of driving around to get new business are done. I think, everybody is working in remote locations and different locations. So if you expect customers to all be in their office, that's not always the case anymore. So you've got to really think about efficiency of sales, what you get, because when you add more sellers, it does not necessarily equate to a straight line of revenue. So what other, modes can you do? So one thing is, do you have a referral program? Is your best bet in driving additional sales a referral and make something in it for the customer, word of mouth? So if it's a roofing company, is that the best way of getting, referral business, word of mouth? And how do you kind of create a groundswell and what's in it for the customer to do a referral? That might be a better lever. And also maybe there's something with the supplier, the roofing materials company. Do they do anything to make sure to help incent, business? And so those are a couple ideas, I would say.
Yeah, that's great. So are there, when say I'm a business leader and I'm looking at data, let's say I've got some decent data, maybe it's not awesome, but it's okay. What do you think are the things that the executives or owners get hung up on that maybe are the false flag? And then also, what should they be paying more attention to than you find they are when you're actually working with companies? Does that make sense? Okay, so let's say I'm a business leader and I am really fixated on this certain metric or KPI, are there some that you find that people are probably wrongly focused on that really aren't necessarily the bigger problem? And what could you do to help direct people more to better data to look at?
Yeah, so if you're fixated on pipeline and leads, so you've got to look all the way through the pipeline. So leads and pipeline in and of themselves don't matter. However, they're early indicators of revenue. So know your numbers. So if you're looking at leads, and maybe you get your leads from realtors who, customers are selling houses and they need a new roof, or you get wherever you get your leads from, maybe you need 5 times the amount of business represented in leads, and then it gets qualified and a certain amount converts. And in tech sales, we typically say you need to have 3 times the amount of pipeline as closed revenue. And then the other thing too to look at is where is the bottleneck in your pipeline. So if you have, we were just talking to a business over the weekend, and they're a year out. So if anyone, orders their service or product, they're a year out before they can deliver because they're so busy. And so you also got to know, okay, so that's probably a good problem to have. Do they hire more capacity and keep quality up? Or do they end up, another issue, obviously, supply chain. What if you can't get the roofing materials? So I think those levers in a business of what capacity you have, and then if you juice the pipeline beyond your capacity to fulfill, that's not so smart. So those kinds of it's a kind of a sophisticated process that changes all the time because, as we saw during COVID, supply chain issues. And Also, it's harder to hire people quite often because, worker shortage or people doing other jobs or working where they want to work. And if you happen to be running a business in, I don't know, a part of the country or a city that people are moving away from, that might make it harder for you to get, to create a successful business.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Geography and like you said, resources that are in close proximity, or some industries have a lot tighter supply chain and others, maybe not. But love that you pointed out again. It depends on your situation. And I think one of the other things that you haven't mentioned yet, I'm sure this is a part of your strategy, but sometimes people just need to raise their prices a little bit. It's like you're never getting to that work anyway. You might as well charge a little more for the work you're doing, and it will thin some of that backlog that you were never going to get to, but you're going to make more money for the same work that you're already going to do anyway. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. Or I'm sure a lot of businesses have done that. If they think a customer is going to be kind of a pain to work with, they may raise their prices for that customer for the hardship effort of having to work with that customer. So I've seen that kind of thing where smaller businesses have that latitude. That for sure makes a lot of sense. Or if you have a super differentiated product, and particularly in the construction field, homeowners are really nervous about hiring trustworthy people. Or is the contractor, the general contractor, or the folks that are doing the work, are they trustworthy? And do they do high quality work? And so people will pay for that.
Yeah, that peace of mind. Yeah, that's a great point.
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, and we've seen this too. Companies just need to do a better job of marketing that peace of mind that they can deliver, right?
Marketing, but also every step of the interaction with the customer. What are they doing to instill trustworthiness? And are they doing what they say they're going to do? Do they clean up at the end of the day when, the homeowner comes home, or if they're away or what have you? And also the word of mouth, the reputational trust. That's huge.
Yeah, and I think the adoption of technology is really helpful in this way. I know this last year we had, pest control come out a few times, and it was very soothing to me and to your point, when I got a text with a link with a photo of the individual coming, the picture of the van, their license plate number, their anticipated arrival time. I mean, there was nothing that I had to wonder about what was going on. So if I wasn't home, I could text my wife or my kids and say, hey, so-and-so is going to be coming at this time. Here's the picture. So there's no concern that, someone's in the backyard, right?
Yeah, that's a really great example.
Yeah. So along with other technology points, are there other KPIs? So you mentioned, pipeline and sales volume, and maybe some metrics of a 30-year pipeline should equal, hopefully, the sales number you're trying to hit. Are there other KPIs that you try and weigh in on when you focus with customers?
Well, there's certainly referenceability. There is kind of renewal. Will they renew their subscription if it's a subscription business, or do we see customer churn? Also, customer satisfaction surveys. Also we look at the mapping, if you will, of our relationships with senior executives. This is more in larger organizations. Do we have relationships? So there are those kinds of KPIs we look at.
Yeah, that's great. All more reasons to hire Helen or people like Helen that are experts in this area. And this is what you do all day, every day. And your breadth of experience over the course of time and all the businesses you work with, obviously you've seen and experienced a lot of these things, not only firsthand, but you've helped others to go through this journey of improvement, right? So as talking about that, just to wrap up the conversation today, are there any words of advice that you would give to a company that maybe they haven't hired a consultant in the past or gone down that road, that you can bring them comfort and say, this is why this is a really good idea. And this is how you're quickly going to be so thankful that you took that step.
Well, I'd say have clarity on what you hope to achieve as a result of hiring a consultant. And I would say have some quick win kind of checkpoints where you can have an exit clause so that the consultant can exit if it's hard to work or achieve a result with a company, but the company can exit if they're hiring a consultant. So a quick win, sort of toe in the water approach. And is the consultant asking the right questions? Do you feel like they understand, they're listening, and they're going to actually achieve what is expected? So think through and have clarity about what you're looking to accomplish, and expect the consultant to be able to map out an approach that gives you kind of milestone checkpoints that also enable you to get out of a contract that you're not, or you're not feeling like that the consultant's doing a good job or that they're trustworthy or whatever the right, words you would use to want to leave, or maybe your business has changed.
Yeah, great advice. So that leads me to one other thought. What, from an ROI perspective, we're in sales, right? We're all in sales. That's what we were saying. From an ROI perspective, what have you seen companies be able to enjoy from an increased perspective after having your services plugged into their operation?
It varies so much because it just really depends on where they are in their journey, if you will, or what they're looking to accomplish. It might be as simple as clarity of message and increased, pipeline and interest in the product. So is that a 10x increase? Probably not. It might be a 2 or 3 times increase, and that could be sufficient. Or if it's a established business and they're looking at different investment decisions, they may have a 10x expectation. It just really depends. That would obviously be a much larger organization. It would typically look at a 10x kind of ROI.
Yeah, very fair points. But it sounds like it's safe to say always covers its own cost plus and always a benefit that companies are able to gain by hiring a professional to come in and give them good advice on these areas.
Yeah, for sure. And it might be a cost savings. Maybe there are cheaper ways of doing things that they hadn't considered.
Yeah, great point as well. So is there anything else, Helen, that we haven't covered today on this topic so far that you wanted to get out into the world?
No, I'm good.
Awesome. Well, it's been a very fun conversation. I've learned a little bit, and I've also been able to gut check a few things that I really feel strongly about. Sound like they're very much in line with your methodology and your approach. So I appreciate the good work that you're doing, and I look forward to continuing our conversations down the road.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen.
Thank you for joining us today on the Mobile Workforce Podcast, sponsored by About Time Technologies and WorkMax. If you liked the conversation we had today, or were able to learn anything new or helpful, please make sure to follow us on our WorkMax page on LinkedIn and on Instagram at WorkMax_. And subscribe to the show on iTunes or your preferred podcast platform so you will never miss another insightful episode. Also, if you enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review and share the show with your friends and colleagues. Your support means the world to us and will allow us to continue providing impactful information with others looking to improve their results in their business and, in turn, their life.